No, I gotta make a video, okay? All right, everyone. Go on a little journey with me. We're going to design, in theory, what the next Ghost Recon game should be. Ready? Let's do it. Imagine this. Opening scene of flying in a helicopter at night. Newsreels playing the intro of some military tensions escalating and upsetting the world powers that are at play. Reels show rebel factions backed by various world powers fighting the current occupant government as well as each other. Innocent people being killed on video by a military regime, as well as innocents caught up in the crossfire between factions as well. US officials deny that they can step in because of reasons, and then it cuts to someone in command of the unit that you're in, and they say they've been given the green light to let you and your team loose in whatever the eastern country is. Command gives you a few leads to pursue when you touch down. They also say they have plausible deniability, so your resources are pretty much limited to what you have on your person. Once exfil is called, then it's a wrap. No one can know that the US is on the ground. Use whatever you can to overthrow this regime. Touching down, you're given one objective: overthrow the regime by any means necessary. You may think this type of Ghost Recon game already sounds pretty familiar, and you're correct. But the Ghost Recon game that I want to see would differ from others because I would double and even triple down on the gameplay systems and mechanics that we're going to talk about in this video. And if that's something that interests you, then stay and hang out for a little while. Now, in order to get an idea of what I would have for a future Ghost Recon game, we actually have to go into the past and talk about a game called Mercenaries. Mercenaries 1 came out in 2005. You play as one of 3 mercs, and your objective is to topple this North Korean regime with the help of 4 factions. You build your reputation with these factions, and they offer various missions, which in turn can hurt your rep with other factions. It is a product of the times, and in no way am I bashing this game. The system was very limited because of what was available at that time. Now that we know a little about Mercenaries, I want you to picture this in a Ghost Recon setting. You're given one objective, and that's to topple this regime, and that's it. It is up to the player to pick and choose what faction or factions to help, if at all. If the player wanted absolutely no outside help, where every single person on the ground with a gun is considered an enemy combatant, that is entirely possible, but it's just a lot harder. First up is the enemy faction that we would be fighting, or the regime. This needs to be a dangerous enemy. Some type of enemy that has real power. The cartel was cool, but there needs to be a legitimate threat of air vehicles as well as armor on the ground. And in my opinion, the wolves felt very similar to the cartel as far as infantry goes. Some of the drones were neat, but after a while, they became annoying. I would have no problem if they were to be included in other ways, but personally, I didn't care for any of the armored drones or the flying drones with guns. Now, when I say a threat of air vehicles, this is what I mean.
Fast mover, 1.5 clicks, southeast.
So in theory,
Moving! Go!
things buzzing us.
Getting locked. I have no idea where from.
Now again, we're toppling this regime, so we need to actually be outnumbered and outgunned as far as vehicles and manpower goes. We're invading an occupied area, so they need to have a heavy presence throughout the region that will increase or decrease based on our actions. Breakpoint can be a different video entirely, but when I say heavy presence, I don't mean 2-man patrols scattered around in the forest like they did in that game, or a gun truck every once in a while on the road. This is a war zone with multiple warring factions. The military presence should be overwhelming, and that includes infantry, ground vehicles such as transports and armor, and air vehicles. Now, another important part of this is the factions that we can interact with. I think ideally there should be 4 to 5 factions to help. Each has some overlapping capabilities but differ in some way. There needs to be consequences to choosing certain sides versus others. And points of interest are critical for all factions and allows them to further their supports that you can use. Imagine if each faction has a chain of command that could be dismantled however the player wants, which in turn will have consequences throughout the region and the story. What I mean by that is the player should be able to take on missions and wipe a faction off the map so they're no longer a part of that playthrough. With a faction system like this, we also need deep stealth mechanics. The stealth mechanics that would allow you to disrupt or harm other factions and not be punished. The way I picture this, it would be a 2-tier system of detection. So say I shoot at a group of enemies and they know they're getting shot at and they know where I'm shooting from. This would be me being detected. Now, shortly after being detected, people from that group would radio in and say that it was me and my squad shooting at them, which would then prompt the rep being taken away. This is what I would call being reported. This opens up a lot of possibilities if done correctly, and will allow for a lot of interesting moments. This isn't an original idea, but many games get this kind of thing wrong where you do something to wrong a group of people and immediately everyone knows on all 7 continents. Now, there needs to be real harsh consequences for killing faction members as well as civilians if the player is detected and reported. If 2 factions that I have a high rep with are fighting each other on a front, make me consider who I help. Allow it to play out without me lifting a finger, and if I want to intervene, give me the ability to do that with the stealth systems that have been built around the game. That would mean if I was able to successfully counter an attack from a faction that I have a high rep with and do it unreported, then I wouldn't lose anything with that faction. The next important part of this game would be its battle system. Objectives need to be impactful and they need to have real rewards and consequences. For example, taking a specific location will allow for me to have certain call-ins in that region depending on what faction controls it. Not all factions will be the same or specialize in the same things. There needs to be reasons to have every faction controlling one base. This will allow the player to basically build a real-world skill tree with that faction rather than something in some menu. A part of this battle system needs to be logistics. There needs to be supply lines that are used by the occupant and various factions. Now, objectives having real and impactful rewards make something similar to a skill tree when it comes to faction supports. I don't like to put limits on myself when I play a game. I want complete freedom and total agency to do what I want, how I want in a game, and when it makes sense. If I want access to artillery support, allow me to take objectives that would give a faction of my choosing to be my artillery support in that region. Or if I was to give that objective to a different faction, maybe they would be able to give me heli support in that region. This will allow the player to make their own choices that fit their playstyle and how they approach not just other objectives, but the game as a whole. The last major important part is it needs to be a real battlefield. There needs to be a dynamic war happening regardless if I'm participating or not. I am not the main character in the story. We'll talk more on that here in a little bit. I'm merely here to keep things on track the way I want them played out. And when they're looking like they're slowing down or they're needing a little correction, I'm here to give that right kind of a push to get things where they need to be. This makes sense story-wise as well because the US was never there to begin with. You can't have a real battlefield without having civilians. This is non-negotiable. Once again, the game needs to double down on not making it easy. Civilians were easy to avoid in the previous Ghost Recon games. Identifying targets on the battlefield is not always a black and white thing. The occupying government will always wear uniforms, of course, but maybe 1 or 2 of the side factions may dress like civilians or use them as shields. Maybe one of the factions doesn't mind civilian casualties at all, which can make the faction system a lot more complicated, which in my opinion only adds more depth to the decisions made in the game. Imagine droning a town and counting 30 humans from a white-hot drone screen, and you identify that 12 have guns with a light armored vehicle patrolling. This means that the other 18 people are unarmed. Or maybe of that 18, there are a few faction members using a suicide vest or some type of drone with a bomb. This slows the player down, and now you're no longer fighting 12 infantry with a vehicle. You're fighting at least 12 with a vehicle. And now the player has to make the choice of stepping in to also kill anyone that's going to kill civilians, which in turn can harm the rep with that given faction. Things get a lot more complicated when these systems are at play. Having these systems makes it very different from roll in, blow the vehicle, and kill the 12 guys, and then roll out. Across the map, the factions need to be fighting and taking control of objectives that they want. If anyone's familiar with RTS games, when you're playing a game against multiple AI, they're doing things that you can't see. They're invading each other as well as gearing up to invade you. They have a brain and they're working not just to fight on the defensive, but also trying to go on the offensive. This will allow for a tug-of-war system taking and defending strategic points. This is crucial. We do not want to clear an area and never return there again. This will only add hours to the player's time that they spend in the game world, and I know for a fact that very specific metric is very important to Ubisoft. If the above systems are implemented, it would encourage the players to replay the game, which is something that Ubisoft would consider a success. Now, a little bit earlier in the video, I talked about us not being the main character. Let's talk about that. If I had a magic wand, and I was able to get Ubisoft to design a game like we just talked about, I truly believe that we wouldn't be the main character of the game because the world would take that spot. Imagine they were to release a game like this and basically not have some scripted cinematic campaign, but rather they give the player a few sandboxes at launch to play in. The game would speak for itself. I would argue that that's what they did with Wildlands. Then they decided to go more cinematic with Breakpoint, which, from my little corner of the internet, it did not at the time and still does not look like Breakpoint is as loved as Wildlands is. If they are worried about the lack of a cinematic campaign, in my opinion, if they were to implement these things that we talked about, the gameplay would become cinematic. With Ubisoft's graphics that they can put into their worlds, all these unscripted moments would become cinematic, and people would be able to pull footage from the game from all over the place to fill that void. Now, really quick, I may be alone in thinking this because I also know the context behind these clips and what went into making them. Look at these clips from Arma 3, which, keep in mind, this game came out in 2013. It's from a game mode that has similar features that we discussed in this video, and just see how cinematic unscripted moments can be.
Is it still up?
Yep. That
Okay.
thing is essentially the AC-130.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Hold that position, friendly
hold up.
DNA.
There is
Gary, we
something.
capped and we
Of course.
Yep, there's something that is in the radar. And it is on my back.
It's a jet. Rocket out. Hit.
Okay,
Went down.
I hear it. On our right.
Do I
Nope, it's fine. It's going down.
Is
Nice.
it not? Oh, no, it,
Yeah, nice.
fire
Good job.
destroyed.
The intro to the game could be the same no matter what map you picked. All they have to do is develop a regime that fits into the 3 maps that they would have at launch. You can come out with multiple factions post-launch that truly play differently. Each map they design could play very differently if done correctly. Tropical dense forests would most definitely not play the same as a map in the Middle East with vast mountains and little cover. One of these maps would have a much stronger emphasis on armor over the other. This would only pad the playtime for the people that play the game, and they would be able to develop maps post-launch and be able to sell them off separately, which I wouldn't be the biggest fan of. I'm just spitballing ideas. But I don't know. All that being said though, I don't make video games, I just play a bunch of them. I played Ghost Recon since the originals back on my dad's dinosaur PC, so I want the game to succeed. I really do. As of recording this video, Ubisoft has pretty much said that the next Ghost Recon game exists, and that's about it. Apparently, we're going to get information on it soon, but who knows? If what I talked about in this video interests you and you have a PC, I highly recommend that you check out Antistasi on a game called Arma 3. I've been playing it a lot lately, and some systems that are in that game mode were definitely used to help me come up with some ideas of what I want to see in the next Ghost Recon game. Anyways, thanks for clicking on the video. I'm Twinkle Toes. Hope to see you guys.